Psycho Pass is a 22-episode anime series with the story writer of the series being the well-known Gen Urobuchi and is produced by Production IG. The genre consists of action, science fiction, and the psychological thriller genre. The series takes place in the unknown future of Tokyo, where everyday life involves the new technology of augmented reality and having an automated society by having the citizens of Tokyo reliant on the government's law enforcement called the Sybil system. The Sybil system is set up to scan any individual's psychological state, which is defined as their psychopaths, which is a grading system of a person's emotional stress level that's preceded with caution if their mental state, or better known as their crime coefficient, becomes high. The higher the number and the more clouded their hue, the greater the risk they are to cause crime in the area. The Sybil system protects these crimes from happening by having biological scanners, safety zones, and personally contacting the individual to advise them through therapeutic measures so they can bring their psychopaths to a healthy level again before any destruction is caused. However, there are times when these clouded hues go unnoticed by the Sybil system, and that's when the MSRB need to take over to bring the justice for their crime. You see the ways of Tokyo's New World Order through Akane Tsunemori's eyes, who was a young woman fresh out of college, starting her career as a rookie inspector. She didn't have the slightest clue of what this decision had in store. The story carries on with the events of Inspector Tsunemori, her closest disciple Kogami, and the rest of Unit 1, while they investigate through the events that lead to the themes of this dystopia. The story that Psycho Pass presents us was very slow-paced and episodic. Each episode turned out to be a different case, which ultimately came down to one big case. This slow-developing story led Psycho Pass to have a small climax, but the overall theme was strongly displayed, and it left open-minded interpretations or messages for you, the viewer. Now, these are just some examples that went through my mind while I was watching Psycho Pass. What determines what's right and what's wrong? What determines the good life? Is the good life known as having a very easygoing life with nothing hard to accomplish? Or is the good life having something very difficult in your life and you accomplished it on your own to bring you to where you are today? And is perfection that's brought up by an imperfection a flaw in itself? I know, it sounds so cool and deep. Oh. A series that leaves these options open for you to determine is, for me, an achievement in itself. Even if it wasn't dynamic and climatic, it gives off a different pace, and it does it well. First, we'll start off with who seems to be our main character, Akane Tsunemori, who is the young and inexperienced inspector. She comes off as a little naive at first when she's learning the works of the enforcement, but keeps a mature poise and logical understanding of everything that's going on. She seems to grow an interest to one of her enforcers, Kogami Shinya, who seems to be the most dependable one in the group of Unit 1, as most of the characters seem to look up to him for most of the missions. He's very coordinated and stealthy when it comes to his physical abilities, but personality-wise, he's loyal and respectful, which grabs Akane's interest as she tries to unravel his past. Watching and learning from Kogami, Akane is able to understand his way of decision making, especially when it comes to Kogami's hatred towards Makishima, who seems to be the main antagonist. And may I say that he's a damn good one. Now, I say this because Makishima is a very intellectual and philosophical person, and he will do whatever he can to succeed in his plan. Now, with his outspoken and intellectual breakdowns, after listening to him, you kind of feel like he's not really such a bad guy and you can actually be on his side. But then he flips shit over and then he makes himself crazy again, which I really like. He's just up and down and he is so sadistic, which is what I really like about him. Out of all the characters, I would say that he is one of the best characters in Psycho Pass. Now for the rest of the characters, they consist of the other members of Unit 1. You have Genoza, who's an inspector along with Akane, Tomomi, the senior of the group with some badass cyber arm. Then you have Shusei, the bubbly and clean guy, Yayoi, the apathetic and quiet lesbo, and Shion, the blonde slut analyst that runs the background information for their missions. Oh, and she's actually Yayoi's lover, which is kind of not really a spoiler alert. This is really all I can say about these characters because, well, not all the supporting characters introduced are characters well scripted for the series. They did attempt backstory on one of them, which I give kudos for, but really had no importance in the story. They kept the characters on a need-to-know basis for this series. Now, is that a bad thing? Not really, but it just shows me that they tried to throw in a little diversity in the characters and just failed. Now, I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say that the main characters of the series played their part well, and they did seem to develop over time. But the lack of attention and even lack of personality from any of the other characters is one disappointment that I have with Psycho Pass.
Now, on a little side note, I did notice that the characters in Psycho Pass seem to have the same tone of voice and gestures. Now, is this a bad thing? It could be, but I look at it in one of two ways. You can look at it as the voice actors just doing a bad job, or you could see it as the characters really sounding the same because they're brought up in a synchronic culture, so they're meant to sound that way. If you're brought up not really having any personality whatsoever, what would you sound like? And that's how I thought about it with Psycho Pass, so I was able to sort of let go of how the character sounded.
The music in Psycho Pass is composed by Yugo Kanno, who doesn't have much of a history, but I will say that the music produced in Psycho Pass is one of the biggest highlights that this show has to offer. We'll start off with talking about both of the opening themes. I personally like the first one better, with that fast-paced punk jam that just gives off this disorienting feeling for what the show is about, which also carries great visuals with it. The second opening seems to be a bit more resolving, which complements the series since it's slowly resolved. The second opening was done in full English, which is still a bit rare and interesting to listen to in any anime, and these visuals, I'm just gonna say it, it's so bebop. Come on, you know it, and it's great. Another cool little note is that both of the ending songs were done by the artist The Egoist, which reminds me a lot of this piece of work right here. Take it as you will, but it's just so beautifully sung. Moving on to the rest of the soundtrack, I can say that it was very well done. Most of the background music gives off a very cinematic feel to the show, and it was well orchestrated. The music in this series also shines the most in the action scenes that just really gets the adrenaline rushing. Overall, the music in Psycho Pass just belongs, and it's done very well. Psycho Pass is produced by Production IG, which is one of my favorite anime studios due to a lot of their previous works just being so nicely animated. As well as Psycho Pass, I would say that the animation portrays the overall theme nicely with the futuristic and cyberific feel that Psycho Pass has. I say this especially because it deals with augmented reality. However, there is one thing that did bother me, and that would be the art style. More specifically, the character designs. It's definitely not IG's best work, and before you go ahead and say that the art style and character designs have nothing to do with the animation, I'll just go ahead and tell you that Psycho Pass was an original series. Production IG didn't go off any of the source material, like how in most cases an anime series is an adaptation of the manga. Therefore, there was no source material for Production IG to follow, therefore I can't really make an exception in this case. About not liking the designs, I mean, come on, she just looks stoned, and Kogame's face doesn't look consistent in every episode. Another thing that bothered me was when Psycho Pass was in its off time. The characters were just undetailed, and this bothered me because when there was nothing exciting to watch, and while you're listening to the characters talk, they should at least look like themselves throughout the whole series. Sometimes you can see a real big difference in their appearance, and I noticed this more towards the end of the series. But I digress on that. One thing that makes me feel better is the fact that they did focus in the close-up angles in the fight scenes, and they were very descriptive and exciting to watch. I just wish there was more of a mid-ground, which made it fairly uneasy for me to watch.
Now, overall, I really did enjoy Psycho Pass. Of course, there were some things that I disliked, like how I mentioned earlier how a lot of the supporting characters weren't really that important to the story, and also how the animation really was up and down at times. It wasn't really consistent. Other than that, I think the one thing I really liked about the story was the fact that it was slow paced, so I was able to really just enjoy and kind of interpret for myself what Psycho Pass was really about. And another thing that I really got from Psycho Pass was that it's a lot different from the normal scheme of anime. And as I was researching for the review, I actually found out that Genya Uebuchi, created that for a reason, and he was trying to get out of the normal demographic of who watches anime. And I found that really interesting. So overall, I would say that if you're looking for something different and you're looking for something that just makes you think and is also really enjoyable, I would check out Psycho Pass. And another thing is that Psycho Pass just really leaves open interpretations for you. Like for the ending, you can find it either optimistic or you can find it pessimistic. There's really two different ways that you can go about Psycho Pass, which I really like, and not a lot of animes can do that for you. So overall, I would give Psycho Pass a watch, and especially because it's done airing now, you can just sort of marathon it, so the slow pacing of the story doesn't really get to you at all. Which it did to me a little bit because I was watching it while it was airing, so I did stop for about 3 weeks so I was able to kind of marathon it. But it's really up to you guys, and I hope you can sort of get an idea of what I said in my review to see if you can enjoy Psycho Pass as well. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed my review, and until next time. Bye! Bye, 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 bye. So long. See you later.